Hi everyone, we are all here at the Regional Reading Conference in Jamaica, and we are representing the University of the West Indies, KFL campus. So you know how here in Jamaica you have the motto, out of many, one people? Well, our group comprises of delegates from 3 CARICOM countries, and we are here to present on Chall's Where Do You Go From Here? I'm Julissa Bailey from Barbados, and I'll be presenting the purpose and the discussion/conclusion, future research questions as well.
Hi, my name is Leisha Linehan and I'm from St. Vincent, and I'll be presenting on the background and questions for discussion.
And I'm Barbara Pivot from Grenada. I will present the key findings, and then I will provide an activity to teach phonics to early readers.
Purpose. The main objective of this paper is to provide major conclusions drawn from an inquiry, along with recommendations for a change in theory, research, and practice relating to improvements in beginning reading instruction.
Chall was a literacy pioneer. Chall was among the first to delve into complex and widely debated ideas about how children learn to read, and in 1961, she was commissioned to review the controversy of how children learn to read. The two warring factions during this time were the code-based method, which is a phonics approach, and the meaning-based method, which is a whole language approach. In terms of the code-based approach, they place emphasis on decoding. Letter identification skills of increasing complexity are taught in a specific scope and sequence. This is actually viewed as a bottom-up model because of the processing of text. Text is seen to move in a single direction, from letter sounds to words to meaning in part to whole fashion. This model also has its basis in behavioral learning theory. On the other hand, we have meaning-based approach, which places emphasis on seeing words in whole, complete text and in a meaningful context. For this method, reading is not about sounding out words, but instead meaning is created with print. This model is reflective of an interactive model because reading is seen as both a top-down and a bottom-up process. The reason for this is that readers draw from higher-level cognitive processes to interact with lower letter identification skills in order to create meaning during the act of reading. The whole language approach has its basis in constructivist or cognitive learning theory. Chall spent 3 years visiting classrooms, analyzing research studies, and examining textbooks. She interviewed textbook authors, reading specialists, and teachers. In this article, Chall examined the evidence and attempted to discover the underlying issues and assumptions, and to sift through facts and understand why scholars have so many different interpretations of the facts. During her investigation, Chall picked apart many programs that were in place and came to the conclusion that there needs to be improvement in teaching students how to read because the system that once worked was failing students. As expressed by Chall, the evidence presented in this article is not a source of endorsement for one method over the other, because there is not enough evidence to assume such. It is believed that there are legitimate reasons behind each theory, and each can be useful in teaching students how to read. I will now hand you over to Barbara, our next presenter, to share the findings of Chall's inquiry.
Thank you, Leisha. Having considered the aim to raise standards in literacy and the demands of this ever-changing world, Chall highlights 5 major recommendations which can be effective in improving the quality of beginning reading instruction. 1. The instructional method necessitates change. According to Chall, while most children are taught to read through the meaning emphasis approach, the research indicates that the code emphasis approach was more effective. Early decoding programs produce students with better word recognition and spelling skills. And contrary to previously held belief, children were better able to read with understanding. Very noteworthy is that students from lower socioeconomic status homes, devoid of books so that they could not be read to, were most likely to learn from the code emphasis approach. Chall was quick to point out that the code emphasis approach was a beginning reader practice, and the reading for meaning approach should not be disregarded. 2. There be a reconsideration of the current ideas about kind of content to include. While she did not conduct a thorough study on content of beginning reading material, Chall states that there is no evidence to prove that content affects the student's reading achievement. She states that it is an untested assumption that by making the content culturally relevant to the disadvantaged students, there will be an improvement in their achievement. She further states that aligning the content to match the experiences of the urban poor students might result in an attitude improvement, but not in achievement. What was important was not the change in content, but rather a change in the reading instructional method as mentioned previously. 3. Basal readers should be re-evaluated. According to Chall, the limited vocabularies contained in the primary level basal readers offer little challenge to the students and restrict their ability to compose richer stories. Additionally, schools should remove the restrictions on students who read above grade level and instruct them from books within their zone of proximal development ZPD range. 4. New tests should be developed. Interestingly, Chall proposes the need for tests that assess the various components of literacy to provide teachers with a means to diagnose students. She states that the current reading standardized tests did not provide clarity as they measure a battery of skills at once. 5. Improve reading research. Chall recognizes the need for a computerized database of the numerous studies that have been conducted in the field of reading. According to her, administrators, supervisors, and teachers need a less complicated access to the data that can inform their practice. While there is no shortage of research in beginning reading, Chall calls for improvement in how research is done. She states that laboratory and longitudinal studies should be used to produce definite answers that will eliminate the need for repetition but provide options for future research. Of utmost importance is the need for objectivity in carrying out such research. Therefore, Chall recommends that researchers interested in knowing rather than in helping should be involved. She admonishes that authors and publishers should be guided by research in the production of reading instructional resources, and that it is imperative that such resources be tested for effectiveness as well as unexpected drawbacks.
Very interesting findings, Barbara. I will now do a quick wrap up of all that was said earlier. From the onset, it is crucial that an appropriate method for beginning reading instruction is used, as this sets the foundation for proficient readers. And saying that we are all here at a reading conference, I'm sure we know the importance of reading on academic success. Remember, you can't learn if you can't read. Chall postulates the need for a code emphasis method, as this produces better results overall. She insists, however, that there is no evidence which suggests that one code emphasis method is superior to another. Though Chall advocates for this code emphasis method, she is adamant that good teaching should not be compromised. This is evident as she states, a poor method in the hands of a good teacher produces better results than a good method in the hands of a poor teacher. Thus, an effective method requires a good teacher for the development of successful readers. Chall's inquiry found no evidence suggesting a link between content and reading achievement, which is contrary to Guthrie, who posits that relevant, authentic world texts impact reading motivation, which then impacts reading achievement. Having considered both sides, one can assert the need for relatable content, which would assist in the learning process. Imagine teaching a primary school student about the letter V and its association with a van, but the image depicted is one of a wagon. Or imagine teaching Caribbean students about seafood cherries, and the cherries being displayed are not Caribbean cherries that they're familiar with, but North American ones that some students may not know about. Confusing, isn't it? Chall maintains that there should be a change in method and not content to increase reading achievement for students from low socioeconomic and ethnic backgrounds. Realistically speaking, the Caribbean classroom is becoming more and more diverse, and catering to the needs of every child can be challenging. Although there is a relevancy for having appropriate content, it should be noted, however, that this content should not be too limited, as it should be a vehicle for taking students beyond their context, especially in such a globalized society. So, the bottom line is it's not the content, but the way we as educators teach. Chall recommends that grade levels be re-evaluated as these are restrictive and fails to challenge readers. This recommendation should be applied to our Caribbean context, as we use these one-size-fits-all basal readers and textbooks, which do not support all types of diversity and varying needs in our 21st century classrooms. It is evident then that Chall is promoting differentiation. Chall also proposes the need for new tests to be developed, given that current tests assess skills as a whole and not the specific skills. In the Caribbean, many of these standardized tests are being used and aren't given an accurate representation of students' reading ability. Finally, Shaw recommends improvements in research, given that the existing research needs to be more rigorous and it is not easily accessible for educational practitioners. Before I hand over to Barbara, we surmise by saying that there's a need for quality research which informs students, parents, teachers, policymakers, all stakeholders in education, not only to talk about the changes, but to implement strategies necessary for these changes in reading instruction. Having read the article, we have drawn up some questions for future research. What are the impacts of an eclectic reading approach on students' reading acquisition up to grade 3? Do you think less divisive results can be achieved if research on reading is conducted by researchers who adopt a positivist methodology? Does the meaning emphasis approach widen the literacy gap among the socioeconomic status of students? Are there any advantages or disadvantages of favoring one method over the other? Does employing code emphasis method early affect comprehension skills in later years or grades?
Thanks, Julicia. This article has given us a lot to think about, and as we were preparing for this presentation, some questions stood out to us as how we can relate Charles' article about the inquiry to our Caribbean setting here. Some of the questions that we compiled for discussion are: what current models are being used across Caribbean classrooms? Do you think too much focus is placed on code-based emphasis in the Caribbean classrooms? How does present beginning reading instruction differ from that of the past across the Caribbean? What are your views on reading achievement in the Caribbean? And our burning question: do you think reading achievement plays a role in students' performance in major exams such as CXC and Common Entrance? I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and we will now hand you over to Barbara to present the strategy. Thank you.
The primary aim of phonics instruction is to help beginning readers understand how letters are linked to sounds to form letter-sound correspondences and spelling patterns, and to help them learn how to apply this knowledge in their reading. Here is an activity that can be used to teach children word families. Students working in pairs will be able to replace letters at the beginning of one-syllable words to create new words. The teacher says, "Today we are going to learn how to spell rhyming word families." Have students select the letter tiles C, A, T, R, and B from the letter bank on their table. Ask them to arrange the tiles to spell cat, then bat, then rat. Then say, "We have been spelling rhyming words. When we want to change a word into another word that rhymes, what part of the word changes?" Students respond, "The beginning of the word." Teacher then asks, "And what part of the word stays the same?" Students respond, "The ending part of the word." Students then look around the class for hidden letters that can be added to at to create new words. Once they collect the letters, they will place it on the word chart on the chalkboard to make new words. Allow students to read all the words. Thank you so much for your time. We hope to see you next year and to hear how this presentation has informed your practice. On behalf of Julicia Bailey and Lisha Linehan, I'm Barbara Pivot saying thank you once again.